Great. Our last question comes from Heather from Staten Islander News Organization. Can you elaborate on what you saw at the Rikers jail in September and how common such conditions were among the population during your visit?
Well, thank you. I mean, I saw a lot when we went out there. The one thing that, I could expand on many of the different conditions. I visited with the women's unit. I sat down with correctional officers. I was in solitary. I was in kind of like the solitary confinement area of Rikers, and so I saw a lot of different circumstances and issues. So I can't describe every single thing, but I think the one that I've been reflecting on the most lately, after Mayor Adams kind of indicated that he wants to restart solitary confinement, was the time that I spent in the solitary wing when I visited. And I mean, I can't express enough how dangerous Rikers Island is for everybody, whether you are someone that is incarcerated, whether you are a correctional officer, whether you are someone visiting. It is not a safe place. And it's not just that it's not a safe place because of the people. It is not a safe place because this is a facility that was built in the 1930s or so that is not designed to be a jail, period, but also not designed to be a place in the way that it's used today. And so there's a certain physical reality to Rikers Island where no matter how much money, how many, no matter what you do, it will remain unsafe because of just the physical setup of this environment and the lack of investment, because it doesn't make sense to continue to invest in a place that A, is going to be closed, and B, should be closed and is not designed to hold people the way they are being held. And so I'll give you one example. I was touring Rikers, and there was one wing where there were young people being held in solitary. And there was a young man that was incarcerated there, and he started yelling when I was doing a tour, and he was yelling about his story and the realities that he was experiencing because he was concerned that the truth wasn't getting out. And he was yelling while some of the staff there were telling me about some of their practices. And I decided when they were finished telling me that I walked over. And I walked over to the cell that he was in alone. And he was being kept in a cell whose door wasn't even working. And so he opens the door and he stays in his cell, but he opens the door and I walk up to him and we start talking. And he talks about how he isn't getting enough food, how he feels like he's starving, about he was scared just by talking to me. He was scared about being retaliated against. But moreover, the thing that I saw was that even if you are a person that believes in solitary confinement, there weren't even enough correctional officers to run a solitary confinement, to even staff it. The UN, by the way, the UN has determined solitary confinement is a form of torture. I concur with that assessment. Solitary confinement is torture. And the fact that we are bringing back torture, or that we even considered or even having a conversation about bringing back torture by whatever name you call it, in this country, let alone New York City, is it is a sad day, and we shouldn't go back to that place. But even if you ignore all that and you still think that's solid, you still believe that this is something that should be that we should continue to do. There isn't even enough staffing to ensure that that a solitary confinement program can even exist, which it shouldn't. And so when we look at all of the people who have died in solitary confinement on Rikers Island over the last several years, regardless of what name sometimes they call it all these different names, but it's solitary. And you look at someone like Leilin Polanco, or you look at the attempts that people have to take their own lives in solitary, a lot of it is because it's not built to exist. And so we are throwing human beings into impossible places that do not sustain human life. And I want to underscore that this is hurting everybody. We do extraordinary amount of mental harm and damage to people. It's a jail. It's not a prison. So the people being held there are being held for crimes that they have not even been found guilty of. And so you're creating incredible mental harm and trauma and inflicting that on a person who has not even been found guilty of a crime, which when they leave creates that type of traumatic experience, only accelerates and encourages potential antisocial behavior to either hurt others or hurt oneself. And then beyond that, it's dangerous for the correctional officers that are there. It's traumatizing to correctional officers. They don't even want to show up to work because the conditions are also very dehumanizing and traumatizing. It is not safe. It's not safe. And so when we throw people into conditions where they're not safe, we only perpetuate the problem further. And I know that that's hard. I know that conversations about crime bring people back to the same conversations and spaces that we always have. But I'm telling y'all, if we do not address these root causes, people are going to continue to die. People are going to continue to be subject to violence because we are not addressing an environment of violence. And until we are able to, we talk about crime, this is a gun violence issue. And we have to address the supply of guns, because the number of kids out there, because you look at who's getting involved in this. A lot of these are kids. They're mentally ill people. They are young men that are teenagers or in their early 20s. There is no shortage of vulnerable communities that can get sucked into a cycle of violence if the supply of our guns becomes unending. And so you can incarcerate half this country and we're still going to have a crime and shooting problem because of our supply of guns, because of our environments of violence, because people are being pushed out into the street and being forced to do things that they never want to do, or they're misled and they get sucked up by a gang structure that rivals the sense of, for a kid, that rivals and creates a perception of community, because we have sucked out all investments in actual safety and community. So we got a lot of work to do. But I think that it's really important in terms of the reality of Rikers that people understand how that cycle contributes to the suffering that we're seeing, because we don't want to deal with this anymore. We can't deal with this anymore.
Well, thank you so much for that. We'll go ahead and end our gaggle now. We want to thank all of our constituents for joining us. Your engagement is what allows us to continue to fight for you in Congress. We would also like to thank our transcribers, Wendy Boer and Amy Lee. Thank you to our interpreters, Gloria Vargas, Debbie Olson, Aldo Rosenden, Chivita Espias, Edward Lowe, Rebecca Chowdhury, Cubic Ali, and Meghan Lama. Again, you can always contact our offices by calling 718-662-5970 for Representative Ocasio-Cortez. Have a great evening, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.